Hello, pocket knife community, knife lovers, knife enthusiasts, interested viewers. Folder here. I want to do an overview on the all-new GiantMouse Tribeca. And I have no problem at all pronouncing that name, unlike the last one, the Atelier, or the Mini Grand. Because Tribeca, the knife happens to be, this is the Tribeca here, it happens to be named after a neighborhood in Lower Manhattan, in New York City. This is what they chose to name this knife after, which I thought was interesting. Cool, pretty cool, right? So it's an area in New York City on the west side. Just below Soho, just north of the World Trade. So, and it's an iconic area of New York City. So anyway, yeah. So this is the Tribeca, and I'm gonna tell you right now. When I first heard about this knife, I had no intentions on getting it. No intentions. I will be completely honest. The only reason I bought this knife, well, one is the GiantMouse, and I absolutely love GiantMouse. But the only reason I actually got this knife is because, and these guys over at GiantMouse are pretty smart. They knew. They put this out in Magna Cut. That's the reason I bought it, I swear. And the reason, and that's because I feel like the Atelier, let's call this the Mini Grand. It's easier for me to say that. The Atelier is hard for me to pronounce. I'm not that smart. The Mini Grand and the Biblio, I felt filled the niche, right? There's an enthusiast here, but there's also a niche that you fill within your knife collection. And within my recent acquires of the GiantMouse, I felt that these filled it. So this was so close in size. So let's see what that size is. So we measured this in a 7 1/4. The Biblio is 6 3/4, 6.75, and the Mini Grand is right in between. Actually, both of them a little bit bigger. So this is a little smaller, a little bit bigger, and the bigger one. But there's a half inch difference between the three. So I'm like, you know what? I'm not getting that. I'm not getting that. And then they had to put it out in Magna Cut. And I really wanted it because it was Magna Cut. Anyway, after doing it, I realized something, and after carrying it for a day or two and really going through this knife is very different than the other two. Very different. And I'm going to tell you why. So I gave you the dimensions, and we can talk about the weight really quick. The Biblio is 3.9 ounces. The Mini Grand is 4.2, and the Tribeca is 4.1. So they're all very close in size, very close. We can do a size comparison of something that's not a GiantMouse and that people are very familiar with, and that's it next to a PM2. That's how it looks next to the Spyderco PM2. Okay, so you have an idea of the size of it. And one more, the Demco AD 20.5. That's how it looks next to a 20.5. The Tribeca. So let's get down to it. The reason why I have these two knives, well, these two additional knives on this, and I'm going to do the review or the overview with these knives in speaking about the three. I think it's really important. Okay, let's talk about this first before we actually do that that overview comparing the three. We have a beautiful, absolute beautiful drop point blade, which I've known that the GiantMouse is what they really they care about aesthetics there. It's really obvious to them. They like big broadsword looking blades. And they, in relative to the handles, they usually make a big blade, and this is no different. It's a drop point. This has a working finish though, and I'm a big fan of the satin finish. I love the satin finish because I think it looks gorgeous. I think it's beautiful for light EDC satin finish, but when you get into heavy work, it's not, because it gets scratched up and it looks terrible. I mean, if you don't care, then that's one thing, but if you care, it looks terrible. This is a stone finish, which is a working finish, and I think it's suiting. So it has that working finish. It's crowned at the top like almost all GiantMouse knives are, which I think maybe they all are. And it has the traditional jimping, and it has a deployment hole, which is very nice on this. Okay, it's a flipper tab and a deployment hole. And I'm gonna tell you, that deployment hole is really gonna come into focus, because this is one of the most easiest knives to reverse flick. So if you're practicing reverse flicking or just learning how to reverse flick a knife, this knife is just very easy, man. You know, there's the mini roach, the Kaiser mini roach is also, I have that knife. I'm not gonna go get it. It's in my safe, my lockbox. But that's also a very easy knife to reverse flick. So by the way, this is also, and then like I said, it also has the flipper tab. It also has a front finger choil / sharpening choil, and a plunge grind is here, and this is actually beautiful because there's a huge amount of room for the individuals that sharpen these knives and don't want to mess up the plunge grind. You got plenty of space here, a ton. So yeah, that's really nice. Real simple blade, nothing on the front. GiantMouse usually has nothing on the front, and on the back it just says Ace CPM Magna Cut in very light laser etching on the back, on the clip side. That's it. Very simple, to the point, you know, really nice. They have these big face T8s here, and unfortunately T6 is in the back. I'm going to address the T6s later. I'm not going to talk about it right now. It's a pain in the ass talking about T6s on these knives. Really is. It uses smooth G10, which is spectacular. I mean, GiantMouse does a really good job with their G10. It has a double-sided tip up, thank goodness, pocket clip. That's very nice. Very Spyderco-like, and it's excellent. It's got a see-through, flow-through design, and a brass backspacer / lanyard hole, deployment hole. I mean, for lanyards. Very competent. It's a liner lock, and the action is really smooth. It is not drop shutty or shake shutty. You have to shut it on your own. So with that in mind, you know, I'm gonna tell you, it feels like this knife is on nylon washers, but so I had to just check it. I had to take it apart to see, and it's not. It's on bearings. It's on bearings. Bearings, of course, are premium, but you know, when it comes to hard use, sometimes they're not the absolute best. Fossil bronze washers are better because, you know, you don't get any grit in them. They, you know, they work through and through. But, you know, bearings are nice too. You know, it's just that if you get sand or dirt in bearings, then you have that issue. But the reverse flick is extremely powerful on this. And it feels really good. It feels excellent. Let me just touch base really quick. I'm going to pause this video for one quick second. Okay, I'm back, and I just wanted to go get my Hogue, the 6-hour K320, and I'm only bringing this into the video because I'm going to yell at GiantMouse really quick, and I'm not going to keep yelling at him. Just going to yell at him this one time. GiantMouse, if you're listening, stop doing this, guys. Seriously, there's a reason why we don't like T6s. They strip, right? They strip, and they strip our tools. This is the Hogue 6-hour K320, okay? T10 and T8s. They didn't use any T6. Well, they did use a T6. T6 just for the clip. That's it. But all the main hardware are T8s. Stop using T6s. All right? So hopefully maybe GiantMouse listen. You know, they're a pain in the ass. I don't know where this whole thing happened with this T6s, but it's terrible. So anyway, when I took this thing apart, this thing has liners, right? It has sort of like nested liners inside. And I'm going to tell you right now, it was an absolute pleasure taking this thing apart. Except for these T6s, pleasure. The liners are sort of really, there's a pattern cut out in the G10 where the liners fit in it exactly. So when you take the scale off, the liners don't come apart. They stay inside the G10. It was a pleasure taking this apart. You know, I put a little bit of lube on the bearings. I looked to see what it looked like inside just to get an idea, because that's what we do. And it is a very easy knife to take apart in service. And that is beautiful. Before I get into the comparison of these three, I'm going to say something. And this is not negative towards GiantMouse. It really is not. But it seems like in this situation, they took a play out of the Spyderco handbook. And I'm going to tell you, you can try to take a play out of the Spyderco handbook and be not successful. And I'm not saying Spyderco does this, because they don't. Spyderco is actually terrible with plunge grinds and sharpening choils. They don't have it. I'm just talking about the deployment hold, how beautiful this knife is, how amazing it's made. It is not a disrespect at all. But it feels very Spyderco-like, this knife, to me. And then Spyderco is my favorite knife company, and GiantMouse is really catching up to them, to me, as far as being my favorite. GiantMouse is, yeah. I mean, I'm waiting for one particular GiantMouse, and if I get that, I'll be ecstatic. But at any rate, yeah. So I'm going to just get into really quick, right? These three knives and the difference between these three knives, and why, if you have this, doesn't mean you shouldn't get this, doesn't mean you shouldn't get this. I'm not selling for GiantMouse. I'm just saying these are not the same knives. Very different. And I'm going to tell you why really quick. Okay, you have the Biblio. I'll start with this, okay? When you have a knife, when we talk about hard use, okay, first of all, the steel GiantMouse use is always excellent, right? M390, L-Max, and MagnaCut. That's the first thing. You can't go wrong with any three of those, right? We know MagnaCut. I mean, addressing the elephant in the room, MagnaCut's the best steel in the world in this right now, seems like. But this knife, when you're talking about hard use, my opinion, ergos are the most important part of hard use knife. Because if there are hot spots in that handle, if it is not comfortable, you are not using a knife, hard use, especially for any length of time, because it hurts your hand. And sometimes if you put on gloves, you get so disconnected from maybe the work you're doing that you can't use gloves. So it has to be comfortable in hand. So ergos, to me, are the most important. To me, just for me, for my big paws, the Biblio drops the puck. And the reason why it drops the puck, just for hard use, is because the front finger choil is too small. Right? When I try to squeeze my finger in here, I feel this sharp edge right here. Now, if you have smaller hands, the Biblio is fantastic. You can choke up on this. You can do any type of push cuts or whatever you want to do. Close, detailed work, you know, whatever, filing, anything you want. No big deal. But, you know, this is dangerous for me. So I can only hold the Biblio back here. Don't get me wrong. It's contoured. It's fat. It feels good in my hand. I don't mind holding it back here. But I can't choke up with this. And in order to do detailed, heavy work, you have to have a knife that you can choke up on. My opinion. Any type of shaving or wood crafting or any type of detailed stuff, you want to choke up on that blade. Okay? So that's why the Biblio falls a little short for me. You're a smaller guy or girl or you have smaller hands, Biblio's fantastic. Love this thing. Okay. Now, let's go to the Mini Grand. Mini Grand obviously doesn't have a choil. It doesn't have a front finger choil. It is not a front finger choil knife. So this is how it's held. I mean, listen, you can come up here on the flats and get close up on the blade a little bit, but there's no choil, right? So technically this knife is for this is a pretty girl right here. This is for show and for light EDC stuff. Now it's got the broadsword harpoon blade here, which I love, so you can do detailed work in that manner and detailed cuts. But we're talking about bearing down. If you really wanted to choke up on this thing and get crazy, it doesn't have a front choil. So it has a different, slightly different purpose. Now we get to the Tribeca. So what they did was, these guys are really smart over at GiantMouse. What they did was, if you notice, all they did with this knife is add, like I said, you know, what are we talking about? 7 1/4, right? 6.75, 6 3/4, and 6.8, 6.9. All they did was, if you look at the area, I hate fingerprints. I'm a fingerprint lunatic. You guys know that. But all they did is, you take the area behind, right? You have this area here, right? This area right here, from the plunge grind to the scale, from the plunge grind to the scale. All they did was take this area from the plunge grind to that scale and increase it. This is where they added their space for the knife. Instead of making the blade much longer or this much longer, they added it right back here. Adding it back here makes the finger choil enormous. Now look at that. Extremely comfortable. So 6'4", right? 260, and my finger can get in there. And it's chamfered. Absolutely beautiful. It really, really is very smooth in it. They took their time. They took their time in there and made this. There's no high spots, no rough spots, nothing. It is just so comfortable in there. Now, when you get up on this thing and you're using the front jimping with that front choil, and you want to bear down on something with a hard cut, heavy use cut, using this Magna cut with these ergos, this is a heavier duty knife. This is a heavier use knife than these two. For me, the Biblio can fit the bill, but it's got a really small choil. And, you know, M390, as amazing as it is, it ain't better than Magna Cut. So, yeah, I like it. I like it a lot. And I'm very glad I got it. And, you know, I really am falling in love with GiantMouse. I don't want to sound too much like a daggone cheerleader. I think I am, you know, but I like what they did. And like I said, I had no intentions on getting this until the Magna Cut. So they were really smart to bring this out in Magna Cut and to make it stone finish instead of satin, and to put this big choil on here. They're telling you, listen, put this thing in your pocket, and whatever you want to use to cut with, this is the tool. This is not going in my safe. I'm going to put this in my pocket. I'm going to carry this. I'm going to put this sucker through the test right here. It's going to go through, this is going to go through fire. I'm going to use this knife. This is going to be a serious user. Like I said, I got a fireplace. I woodcraft at my house. I cut up wood all the time, do shavings, kindling, and all types of stuff I do. So this is going to get, this is going to get use out of this. So anyway, yeah, that's all I got, guys and girls. Yeah, GiantMouse Tribeca, named after a neighborhood in Lower Manhattan, the Tribeca section of New York City. Beautiful. That's all I got.